The ageless wisdom, on a physical level, is comprised of human beings, just like us, in a current time, in a time not that long ago, and possibly in a time long, long, long ago. So, they too got together and say, well, hang on, there is this way, and this way is actually the way we only know, but there's this incongruency, there's this tension, there's this something that doesn't sit right. And come to think of it, there are moments where I go into stillness, and that stillness highlights the fact that that's not right. And so they've pondered deeply. They stood back, took a step back, and said what's really going on, what are the possibilities, and were willing to ask, is there another way? Is there a possibility that there isn't this tension? Is there a possibility that there isn't self-doubt, negativity, and this role play that we constantly play? In other words, we have to be a certain type of man, a certain type of woman, tick certain boxes, and so forth. Is there a different way? Other questions. And that's how it started. It was a very innocent beginning in the sense that it doesn't make sense. Let's take a step back, call it for what it truly is. Could there be a different way? If there isn't, fine, I'll step back in and I'll do the best I can. But if there is a different way, then it's worth knowing about. It's worth exploring, worth discovering. Everything is energy. And if everything is energy, everything is because of energy. And so if we're looking for the answers of why things happen, why is cancer still going through the roof? Then the answers are in energy. What part of the word everything is not all of us? What part of the word everything isn't everything that we're doing? Even you sitting, me talking, you listening, it's all energy. So what part of everything is not everything? So we can say everything is energy, but we live in this world where, oh yeah, that's just a scientific term. That's for physics, quantum physics. There's a part of me that is not everything. Really? So the word everything doesn't mean everything? I see. It's only science. 2,500 years before Einstein, Patanjali said, everything's light, and everything is about light. And he taught how to live in light and make life about light. Now, substitute the word light and energy are one and the same thing. How did he know 2,500 years ago? Pythagoras taught in his schools just after Patanjali, 2,500 years ago. Pythagoras taught the fact that if we spent a small portion of our life understanding ourselves as energetic beings, the rest of our life would be heavenly. That if we could capture a moment, a 5-year moment in our lives, and that we could hone in who we were and understood ourselves from an energetic point of view, in other words, from the lightness that you are, as he used to teach, then we could spend the rest of our lives as the heavenly person that we truly are, simply because we've devoted a small time of our relatively long life to knowing who we really were, and therefore out of that we could live in the integrity in the knowingness, or in integrity from the knowingness. In the ageless wisdom, it's always been known that everything is energy. Everything was about light. God is light. Creation is light. Everything is about energy. The teachings are always about producing energetic integrity and energetic responsibility. So why is it that we ignore all of that, when really that makes more sense than anything else? The concept of the inner heart is not new. In fact, the knowledge of the inner heart as being the greater intelligence and wisdom of the human being has been known for thousands of years, evidence of which can be dated as Pythagoras 2,500 years ago, and the ensuing Pythagoreans, all the way to Plato and many unknown and equal proponents of such religious ways. Today, the cardiocentric view or way of life can be understood to be an energetic state of being, not a knowledge, and not only that it is a certain and known energetic state of being, but it is one that comes from within. In other words, the cardiocentric view and the living way of the inner heart mean one and the same way of living, thinking, and behaving. Further to this time-honored knowledge, the Pythagoreans established the ancient teaching that not only was there an innermost place within our being, which they called esoterikos, but that it, the place itself, was the place where man met his soul, and they said it so. Their religious practices held the soul as the divine aspect of the human being. It is the soul, they taught, that could impulse life forth and thus bring that divine element that was so missing in man. Thus, it could be said that the birth of the way of the livingness began 2,500 years ago with Pythagoras and the ensuing Pythagoreans. If this is understood, it follows that the teachings of Patanjali circa 150 BCE were a continuation of the teachings of the soul practiced by the Pythagoreans, hence the lineage. Patanjali also distinguished the differences between spirit and soul. He did not just use the term man and soul. His teachings made it not only clear and certain that there was a difference between spirit and soul, but that it had to become a practice to foster soul life over the meandering mind and ways of the spirit. Patanjali made broader the religious practice of living by a way that was to discipline the spirit's waywardness, so that our vehicle, the body of man, could be lived by the way of the soul, thus producing what he called the kingly body. And he termed the practice Raja Yoga, which means kingly union, or union with our king or kingliness. So the kingly body was seen as the enlightened ordinary state. It wasn't seen as exalted, special, or anything like that. It wasn't seen as exclusive, and it wasn't seen as better than anyone. It was seen as something that we had to responsibly do. Because of the waywardness that people were living in society, there had to be a responsible call to bring a way of life that brought order by way of reflection, not by force. So he developed the practice of Raja Yoga so that we can develop a self-discipline, so that we can reintroduce responsibility to self, and with responsibility to self, responsibility by order of that practice with others in society. The kingly body was seen as the enlightened ordinary state, as opposed to the spiritual body man wrestled with on a daily basis. The kingly body was seen as the enlightened ordinary state. In other words, no big deal. It was just a dedication to responsibility. But Patanjali goes on to say, as opposed to the spiritual body man wrestled with on a daily basis. Now, if that occurred 2,200 years ago, 2,150 something years ago, what has changed? If he was saying already back then that man was wrestling with his own self, with his own mind, nothing has really changed. Well, we got buildings and we got iPhones and technology and the whole thing. Great. Many great improvements. The world is opened up to greater responsibilities, and there's less opportunities for the tyranny of empire to take over. A great thing. But the individuality of man hasn't changed. There was still that wrestle with the self. There was still that lack of commitment towards self-responsibility that brings about the fact that we are living and already holding a kingly body. So the extremity of the discipline that has to be given to mankind in the past is going to have to be sustained as well. However, the principle of purpose and dedication towards responsibility, towards love, towards developing the kingly or divine body is not